when I teach is I like to take a telescopic view and then narrow down to what I say is a microscopic view. Get the big picture, and then we look down at the minute. So with that, uptake and distribution, everything we do in anesthesia follows the way of the universe, which is entropy. The expansion and spread from high concentration to low concentration. That is everything we do, everything we follow in the universe. And that's where all this comes down to. This is all about high concentration to low concentration. Diffusion, entropy. That's what uptake and distribution of inhalation agents are. Keep that in mind. It's all about concentration gradients. Nearly everything we do is about concentration gradients. That being said, when you're talking about uptake and distribution, and as you'll see when you're with Dr. Shores, chemistry and physics, leave common sense and intuition at the door and do the same. It's not intuitive, but it will make complete sense after we get done with this. So, why uptake and distribution? We give a known concentration of an anesthetic gas via an anesthesia circuit through ventilation to the patient. The gas enters the lungs, the alveoli, passes through the alveolar membrane into the blood, to the left side of the heart, and out to the tissues. First the brain and vital organs, then the muscles, skin, fat, and connective tissues are perfused in that order and over a course of time. The science of uptake and distribution comes from the full understanding of all the dynamics which affect the flow, the transport, and the absorption of this gas as it makes its way from the vaporizer to the brain and then the other tissues. Our end target organ is the brain. You can also go and say the spinal cord. The central nervous system is the end target organ of our anesthetics. So, our goal is to achieve a brain concentration of anesthetic that achieves amnesia and analgesia. And if I was to say what are the three components of anesthesia, what would they be? Okay, so we could actually add a mobility to that. We don't need to give muscle relaxants. In fact, our volatile anesthetics can achieve all three. You just have to give enough. So, inhalation anesthetics are standardized by MAC. That's minimum alveolar concentration. Minimum alveolar concentration is a coin toss. 50%, this is going to be enough to keep them on the table from noxious stimuli. 50%, it's not. It's a ballpark. Why? Because when they were studying these gases, and they realized that if you give these gases, they kind of knock you out and they induce this stupor. And they said, well, how do we do dose-finding studies with this? Well, most dose-finding studies are, they say, well, let's give this to a rat. Rat, because rats, you ever wonder why we study rats? Why not bunny rabbits more often, or cats, or guinea pigs? We use them too. Well, why not buffalo? Giraffes. It's not socially correct? No. Rats handle drugs. Pharmacokinetics, very similar to humans. So there's a little rat in all of us. So what they do in rat studies is they'll give them a dose and see the effect. They're dead. Cut the dose in half. They're dead. Cut the dose in half. They're near dead. Cut the dose in half. They're still moving. All right? Bring it up, half. And we do halves, and that's dose finding. Is basically, in short, how we do dose finding studies. They did similar with anesthetic gases, but then they found there's a wide variation. And it's kind of hard to go and say that with these, you know, we'd like to find one that works well in, say, 90% of the patients. Well, if you take 1% isoflurane, and that's enough to anesthetize you, but I need 2%, and actually it's 3% that gets 90% of the population. If I go and give the effective dose for 90% of the population to everybody, your pressure is going to be in the gutter. You're going to die. I'm going to overdose you and you're going to die. So we really can't do that with volatile anesthetics. So we're going to go and get right in the middle, 50-50. Okay? We adjust accordingly. So basically what MAC does is gets us in the ballpark. It gets us in the ballpark. So when you're doing your anesthetic, what's the MAC of sevoflurane? 2%. What a lot of people do is immediately go to 2%. Well, that's getting us in the ballpark. All right? But we're going to titrate to effect. We're going to titrate to effect. Now, when these dose-finding studies were done, it was done with an inhalation agent only. No fentanyl, no Versed, no nitrous oxide, no IV lidocaine or local anesthetics, no other medications. This is pure and simple inhalation agent alone. And you're going to hear me time to time talk about an anesthetic gas, a volatile anesthetic, and an inhalation agent. Anesthetic gases are pretty much all the anesthetic gases that we can give. That'll make you go to sleep. Some people say anesthetic gases, and it includes what we call carrier gases. Carrier gases are air, oxygen, and nitrous oxide. Be very clear with this. Volatile anesthetics are ones that are liquid in the container, and you open it up and they evaporate. And what we do is we breathe in the vapors. Technically, it's not a gas, because at standard temp and pressure, it's a liquid that evaporates. We're breathing in inhalation agents that are volatile anesthetics. That would be sevoflurane, isoflurane, halothane, ethrane, desflurane. Nitrous oxide is not a volatile anesthetic. It is a gas at standard temp and pressure. Its natural form at STP is a gas. So it is a gas. So it is an anesthetic gas, but it is not a volatile anesthetic. Be clear on that. That's a simple question to get muffed up on. So we have our anesthetic gases, which is a general term, usually means whenever inhales, nitrous or SIBO, something like that. Our volatile anesthetics, which are just our anesthetic gases. Our inhalation agent could be all of them, and our carrier gases are just that. And be clear, and then you'll understand it better when they describe one, particularly in the literature. So, MAC, as I said, is the minimum alveolar concentration of inhaled anesthetic at 1 atmosphere that prevents skeletal muscle movement in response to noxious stimuli in 50% of the patients. And what we do is, this is important, that's why I have a star. So if I ever make everything really bold and red, or put a star next to it, it's probably muy importante. We extrapolate brain concentration of anesthetic by expired alveolar concentration. We do not, well, we do. We have probes that we can put into the brain and measure the anesthetic gas concentration in the brain. And that would be good, because ultimately that's where we want to make sure the anesthetic gas is at a decent, an appropriate level to induce amnesia, analgesia, and immobility, right? All right, it's not a good clinical idea to do that, though. Okay? You know, pulse ox shines through, calculates that what our saturation is, that's good. Stick a probe in the brain, not good. That's good for rats. It's okay to kill them. Kindly. So what we do instead is we can actually measure the expired alveolar concentration, our breath. 2% sevoflurane. Hey, I'm at MAC. So, because the correlation of end alveolar concentration of an anesthetic gas correlates with our brain, right? As soon as you breathe something in, where's the first place it goes? Brain. Lungs, left side of the heart, straight up. 80% goes right to the brain. Okay, so we can easily measure gas from the alveoli, and that correlates so closely, we assume they are essentially the same. So end tidal concentration, end tidal alveolar concentration is essentially brain concentration over anesthetic gas. So here's the basics of uptake and distribution. And if you can understand this and describe this to yourself and to your classmates, then you know uptake and distribution. Because it is all about going from what's in the jar of the vaporizer through the pipeline of the anesthesia machine to our circuit. Circuit just basically recirculates an amount and adds a little bit additional oxygen and or air and or nitrous oxide. Breathe into the lungs, diffuses into the bloodstream. Most of it goes immediately to the brain, circulates around the brain, also the other tissues, and comes back to the body. So we've got a loop circle in our circuit for ventilation. We got a loop circle in the circulation of the body. This is all about uptake and distribution. The difficulty comes when we apply the details to every step of the process. Have you guys looked and learned the vapor pressures yet? Good, good, good. What's the vapor pressure of isoflurane?
231.
241, 243. It's temperature dependent. It depends on what you say room temperature is. Our room temperature or the operating room. So it's about 243. That's the number I use. Okay. So 243, that is the Dalton's law that tells you what? Partial pressure. Okay. So 243 is the partial pressure of what total pressure? 760, atmospheric pressure. Good. So if 243 is the vapor pressure, then what's the rest of the pressure? Yeah. Well, yeah. 760 minus 243. And what's exerting that pressure?
Nitrogen.
Good. Good. All right. So now tell me what that is in percent.
Volume over volume.
It's 241 over 760.
Which comes out to be what percent?
31, 32.
31, 32, 33. If I was to go and give you these vaporizers, let's say if I put a vaporizer here and it said 21%, what anesthetic gas would that be? Did you do the math? Yeah, you're right. It would be SIBO. So I can tell you right now, this is either isoflurane or halothane. Good, good. This is good. These are really good, sneaky questions they could ask on an exam. You're like, boom. Okay, so here's my liquid right here. Up here is gas. This is my liquid isoflurane. And these little molecules, depending on how much room temperature, ambient energy is being put into those molecules, some of them are going to get enough energy and they're going to pop up into the gaseous phase. They're going to bounce around with a little bit of kinetic energy and move around. What's the percent up here of gas? 33%. That's right. Here's my isoflurane liquid. The gas right there is 33%. Do we want to do this? Push that into the circuit? No, no. So what we have on the vaporizer is a bypass that goes straight through. And in fact, the gas, when we go and get a carrier gas, say oxygen, it literally flows through the vaporizer. It just doesn't go down into this chamber. It goes into the part of the mechanism, it just bypasses. And then we'll open up a little port that'll allow it to pick up a percent. There used to be a time when we would have to do splitting ratios. We would have to go and say, I'm running 4 liters of oxygen. How much do I have to split? How many liters or milliliters have to go into this chamber to come back up, dilute the total flow so that I will go and get myself 1.2% of isoflurane? Those were the days I had to calculate splitting ratios. We just have these dial calibrated now. Click, click, 1.2%.
You don't think that'll be on the boards?
No.
Yours
Splitting
is
ratios?
lower.
Nope. Splitting ratios are no longer on the board. So you can just go and say, yeah, back in the day, old hairs had to go and do splitting ratios, but no more. So don't worry about it.
So when you were talking about the vaporizer, that's Henry's law, right? With the liquid at the bottom and the gaseous phase at the top. And
Very good.
we just learned about it. Don't be impressed.
Okay.
I'm just making sure I'm cementing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. So then we get our 1.2. I'm going to use isoflurane. 1.2% of isoflurane. Yes, I know some people say it's 1.1. Some people say it's 1.15. 1.2. So now 1.2 comes in here, and I have, remember how many liters of oxygen? 4 liters I was going in. All right. And then I have 4 liters coming in this per minute. All right. What's my minute ventilation? Normal minute ventilation.
2,400.
How many liters per minute? 5 liters per minute ventilation. Okay, that's about an average minute ventilation. Say 5 liters per minute. So this guy's being ventilated at 5 liters per minute. I'm putting in how many liters per minute? How much rebreathing is there per minute? 1 liter of this circuit is being rebreathed. I'm replacing then how much? What percent am I replacing every minute? Huh? 80%. So I'm doing a washout, I'm pushing out 80%. Okay? Let's go and say that I have 5 liters per minute ventilation, and I'm putting in 1 liter a minute. How much rebreathing is there?
4?
None.
I'm putting 1 liter in. He's breathing 5 liters per minute. So a fifth. I'm only putting in a fifth. 4/5 is being rebreathed. Versus dumping in before, I was dumping in 80%. We were only rebreathing 20%. Okay. Which one do you think would increase the concentration in here faster? 4 liters or 1 liter? 4. That's right. So now you know one of the most important aspects to go from the vaporizer affecting inflow is concentration. Concentration. Concentration, which we know dictates, oh, that's one of the largest, most important factors. Now, I can go concentration of my anesthetic gas, or I can go with concentration or total flow. Q. Whose law does flow?
Is it thick?
Fixed formula does, yes, no, but who's physics law? Rousseau's. Rousseau's. Good. So I can increase my ventilation, my flow, my total flow, and that will go and increase the rise of my anesthetic circuit. I could go from 1.2 here, I could crank it up to 2. I would double the speed at which I raise the concentration. Okay? So now we've got 2 factors. We can increase flow and we can increase concentration, right? And that will increase what's in our anesthetic circuit. Because what's happening now is we go from here to here, dilution. 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 And then from here to here, dilution, dilution, dilution. It gets diluted every step of the way. And this is what delays our onset of adequate anesthesia, because of dilution. So what is the most important thing we can do to compensate for the limits or the time limits of diffusion and the inherent dilution that occurs? What's the most important thing we can do? Concentration. Followed very closely by, in this particular situation, flow. Flow. Okay. So let's go step by step and look at every aspect of this, of how we can apply and what we can do in the operating room to control uptake and distribution, because ultimately that's what we want to do. We want to have control of diffusion and flow. Now, when you see here, this is flow delivered, sub D, delivered, flow inspired, big A, alveolar, little a, arterial. You will sometimes see PD or PI, and that's just partial pressure. It's either way. You can go flow or you can go partial pressure. Either way, they can describe your inflow. Okay? So, there may be partial pressure differences between the vaporizer and the inflow to the circuit, inflow and the circuit and the alveoli, the alveoli in the blood, and the blood in the other tissues, just going back and looking at that picture. And when you go through all of these, go back to this picture all the time, because this makes it very, I'm a picture-oriented person. So the factors that affect inflow, the factors that affect this right here. The anesthetic concentration. Now, all of our anesthetics let us go with a range of anesthetic. Isoflurane, we can go from 0.1, we can go all the way up to 5% on isoflurane. There's a limit to how much concentration you can get out, one based upon its vapor pressure, and also we don't want the ability to kill people as easily as possible. We don't want that. We want it to be difficult to kill people. Sevoflurane can go up to 8%. And desflurane can go to 12 to 16% with desflurane. So we can increase the anesthetic concentration, the FD, the flow delivered. Certainly increase alveolar ventilation, minute ventilation. We can increase now, there's two aspects to increasing flow. We can increase the carrier gas flow that goes over the vaporizer, picking up the anesthetic gas quicker and putting it into the circuit. Now, if we do just that, we're going to start washing out the circuit, because remember, the circle system is just that. It's a circle that has a port that goes to the patient and a port that goes to the chimney of the hospital and vents it out. So it's a circle system that leaks twice. One to the patient, one to the chimney. In, circle, circle. So if I have a minute ventilation of 5, and I have a carrier gas flow rate that I go from, given 1%, I'm going to go 1% isoflurane, fixed at 1%. If I have 5 liters per minute going in, and 5 liters per minute being breathed, what's the rebreathing? There's no rebreathing. So every minute I'm completely washing that out and dumping it. Now I cut that down to 1%. And I put that same 1% gas in and 1 liter flow in. Now I'm doing a rebreathing, aren't I? So now I'm dumping in, but I'm only dumping in 1%, 1/5 of the volume that's being rebreathed. So I'm not going to get that concentration as raised as high in that, and that will slow. So it's increased flow and increased ventilation affects the inflow. And here, this is really insignificant anymore. Characteristics of breathing circuit. How many here are an former ICU nurse, or you're still an ICU nurse? Yeah. Anybody not an ICU nurse? Critical care. You're all critical care nurses. I know that. You've had propofol infusions, didn't you? How many times have you had propofol infusions that ran all shift? How many times have you had a propofol infusion that syringe just kept alarming? Occlusion, occlusion, occlusion. No matter what, you're like, I'm just sick and tired and going to replace everything. Runs fine, it's not the IV. Has anybody had that experience after propofol syringes? You know why? Why? Because propofol dissolves into the rubber plunger. That rubber plunger swelled and now became very tight in the polyvinyl chloride, polypropylene syringe. That is why propofol syringe pumps on long cases beep occlusion, because the diisopropylphenol, the propofol, absorbs into the rubber and expands it. All of our volatile anesthetics love fats. They are very lipophilic, and they love to dissolve in fats. So if we had a lot of rubber components or a rubber circuit, and we're putting a bunch of isoflurane or any of the volatiles through that rubber circuit, what do you think is going to happen to that rubber circuit? It's going to absorb some of it, and that's going to slow down how much we can get to the patient. The good thing is now we have little to no rubber in our machines. So the characteristics of the breathing circuit is now irrelevant. Irrelevant. And that's a good thing. Back in the day, that used to be a problem. If it's black, it is probably rubber, and it's probably real old. If it's clear, you don't have anything to worry about it. And that's A lot of things are silicone now and other plastics. It's not rubber so much. In fact, you really look to find one of those old contoured black masks. They're cool. They're heavy compared to the ones that we have now. There's benefits to the ones that we have now. You can actually see through them, so you can actually see the mouth, you can see the color. But those other ones that were, and I think Dr. Hogan may have one up on his desk. That's what we used to have. You could autoclave them. You could do anything. They are durable, but they would absorb the anesthetics. So rubber's not good for lipophilic substances because it absorbs lipophilic substances, including our volatile anesthetics, which are very lipid soluble. Huh? So if you have rubber components in your anesthesia machine, does it become a reservoir later? Yes. And so what happens is when we reverse those concentration gradients, and we're no longer dumping it from a vaporizer into the circle system, well, where's the high concentration now? The circle system, or the patient, and then the circle system. So then when we try to reverse it, it slows things down. That's right. That's a very good point. So it can act as a reservoir in slowing things down. So, other anesthetic concentration. A higher flow delivery and thus higher flow inspired increases the rise of FA, the flow of the alveolar. You're going to see FA-FI ratio. FA to FI. What is the alveolar concentration to the inspired concentration? And we'd really like them to be 1. Whatever we decide to deliver, we want that to be the alveolar concentration. And in a perfect world, it would be instantaneous. Because then I have total control and immediate control. Because everything about anesthesia now is fast. We want it quick on, we want it quick off, we want no residue, no hangover. We want it quick, here and now. Just like everything else in life. Here, now. Don't make me wait for my fries and Coke. Other factors affecting inflow. Alveolar ventilation. And we're beating this into your heads. Yes, we are. Repetition's good. Hyperventilation increases the rate of rise of the FA. We talked about that. Increased minute ventilation, you can go and flush out, flush out, flush out, flush out, and start rising that up. We're going to actually look at wash in and wash out curves. We're going to do the math as to how those wash in and wash out changes occur over time. We'll be able to actually calculate how fast I can have an alveolar concentration get up based on my flow and my concentration. Hypoventilation decreases the rate of rise. So, and mechanical hyperventilation that decreases venous return accelerates the rise of the FA. Do you ever notice that when you give somebody a Valsalva on a ventilator, sometimes their heart rate slows down? Do you ever notice when you give a big breath, sometimes you see your pulse ox go boop, 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 slower boop, lower boop, big boop, big boop. Or on an A-line, you see cycling. Back in the day, does anybody know what stroke volume variation is? Yeah, you guys all have those machines, don't you? Well, you know, and whoever came up with that was brilliant, weren't they? You know who came up with that? ICU nurses from the 70s and the 80s, people like me. Because what we used to do, can we record over here? All right, that's an exaggeration. We used to be able to look at patients like that and say, oh, geez Louise, they're hypovolemic because they're on a mechanical ventilator. We increase intrathoracic pressure. If we have low volume, we can collapse the vena cava and we can drop preload. So consequently, big deep breath right here. Boom, boom, boom. Now we see the preload work through the heart and have lower cardiac output. Well, back in the day, well now, this would be a stroke volume variation, I don't know, 17. I mean, this is obvious. But back in the day, us ICU nurses used to do this. And I don't draw real good. and it would be a little bit more subtle. So we would look at the EKG strip, and we'd go like this. Oh, look at that. Because we draw a straight line. And we look and see, going across the EKG rhythm, if there was variation. We didn't need a multi-$1,000 machine if somebody came up and said, oh, look, we're Edwards Corporation, look how smart we are. Yeah, you copied off of ICU nurses for the last 40, 50 years. So that's basically what stroke volume variation is. Another trick, which you probably, I'm preaching to the choir here, I know. Did you ever do this one with an A-line? What's the difference there? The dichrotic notch. Which one has less volume?
So the stroke volume is going to be larger in the second one, I think, because it represents the closing of the aortic valve.
That's right. So if you have a lot of afterload, more volume, will it close the valve sooner or later? Sooner! So let's just look right at the location of that dichrotic notch. And you know what that does now? If we look just at the location of the dichrotic notch in the stroke, here's our total peaks and our bottom baseline. Here's the top peaks. We have a manometer. Here's your afterload, your peripheral vascular volume in this scenario and in this scenario. Who needs a stroke volume variation Edwards machine flow tracker? No. We can do that by looking. And we can do that on an A-line. We can do that on pulse oximetry. You can even do it on pulse oximetry. But you must have good flow. And you must have good, that's another lecture, but with pulse oximetry, how many people put an extra large glove, latex glove, on the patient's hand when he can't get a good pulse ox? Try that. Especially in the cold OR, out like that, you can't get a real good waveform, put a glove on them.
Just put one finger.
One finger? Well, you can do just one finger. Yeah, but I don't want to get my scissors and cut it. I just throw a glove on them. How many people used to be a wrestler in high school? All right, I was a wrestler. We used to go and have plastic suits. That's how we would lose weight. So I used to go and say, has anybody ever put themselves in a garbage bag? And nobody had said, garbage bag. Well, we used to do that too. That was a poor man's plastic suit. You put a hole in the hefty bag, up your arms out, put a sweatshirt over top of it. You will sweat. And you will sweat, and you'll sweat, and you'll lose weight. So you just get on the machine, wait, I need weight. Then you go drink a gallon of water, eat a bunch of donuts, throw up, and go wrestle. Well, the same thing works in the operating room. Cover your patients with clear plastic. If you don't have a bear hug or a forced air warming system, you can do the same thing with the glove. Holds heat and improves your blood flow. Now, as a side, can we stop recording for one? No, don't record it. I am not advising you to do this. I'm a student. It's like, we can't get a good pulse ox. We're trying it all over the place. Not, cold, can't get good perfusion. Goes, I'll fix that. Takes out 0.5% lidocaine, puts 0.5 cc on either side of the finger, does a finger block both nerves. Hyperemic, great blood flow. But you did a regional block. I was like, dude, man, you didn't. There's no consent for that. But we got a nice pulse ox reading. Don't do that. But I digress. Mechanical hyperventilation that decreases venous return accelerates rise of FA. Anybody understand that? Why? This makes sense, doesn't it? This makes complete sense. Does that make complete sense? This is a test question. And it's not going to be asked like this. It's going to be asked in a clinical scenario.
As cardiac output decreases, it increases the rate of induction.
It increases the rate of alveolar concentration rise.
Right.
Why?
What happens to the alveolus happens to the brain? I don't know why.
Because it can't go, it's not going to circulate and go out to the brain. It's going to stay in the alveoli because there's no,
You guys have watched old videos, haven't you?
Yeah.
You know the choo-choo train analogy. No? Okay, you guys are right. That's awesome. And it's not intuitive. You would go and say, if I'm putting anesthetic gas into the alveoli and the blood flow's coming in, I want a faster blood flow to pick that up and get it to the brain faster so they go to fast sleeper, and that's intuitive, and that's wrong. We want a slower flow. And if you think of it in the analogy, which I think I have the analogy here,
Can't get on the train.
no, I don't. Sorry, I got a real pretty picture of choo-choo train. Okay. So my alveoli is the filling station. We're filling this up, not with cold, but with gas, isoflurane or volatile anesthetic gas. And that alveoli is going to dump it into the blood flow that comes in, goes around the alveoli, and goes back out. So if I have blood coming by real fast, diffusion is a time-sensitive factor. It's going to diffuse at a given rate based on concentration. The other factors are pretty much fixed. The solubility of the agent, the thickness of the wall that it's going through, the lipid nature and the solubility of that wall, all those are fixed. The thing that dictates diffusion in fixed formula is concentration. Now we're looking at all the factors that we can increase that rise in alveolar, but now let's look at the blood flow going through. The blood, if you think of the blood flow as cars in a train filling up. If you have a train come into that station and just flies through the station, how much is each unit or quantity of blood that goes by that alveoli going to have time to pick up a good concentration? It's not. A fast flow is going to fly by those alveoli, not pick up a lot. It's just going to be trickling in as it blows by. And ultimately, that high concentration that initially goes with that 80% cardiac output up to the brain is not going to be as filled and as high of concentration in that unit of time as if I had a slow cardiac output. Now I got a big chunk in this blood. Now it goes up to the brain and it goes, knock them out. Fast blood flow, it's going to go up and it's going to trickle a little bit. Trickle a little bit, trickle a little bit, and you're going to have slow onset. You have a question?
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to think about this, like, won't it somewhat compensate though? Like, so if you have fast or like lots of cardiac output, it's gonna pick up maybe a little bit, but it's gonna go more times around, so it's gonna continue to pick up as long as we're administering.
Yes.
But if we slow the cardiac output down, it's gonna pick up a lot at one time, but it's not gonna get there as, as quickly. So like, won't it even out at some point?
No, it's all about how fast and how much of a quantity can we get in at a given moment. Now let me ask you, how much isoflurane can I saturate in the bloodstream? How much can I dissolve in the bloodstream? And then I'll go one more and I'll say, how much isoflurane, how many milliliters of this gas that can vaporize can I saturate in the human body? Oh, a massive amount. I can put a massive amount of volatile anesthetic dissolved in your body. I can dissolve it in every tissue compartment. Give me the long enough, I can get it in your hair and your fingernails and certainly your bones. Just give me enough time and I can go and push it in there. I can have the body absorb and suck up a lot. So if we need 1.2 or 1.12% isoflurane in the brain, but I'm putting it in so that it takes 0.1, 0.2 to the brain and then 0.1, 0.2 out to the body, now what I'm doing is filling up the body 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. It'll take me all day. And I can actually get more anesthesia in you slow over time than if I just quick hit you with a big punch to your brain real quick. The goal is to get a higher concentration in the brain at the expense of time and duration for filling up the other reservoirs such as our muscle and our adipose tissues. We don't want to fill them. That's why. It's all about how can I punch the brain real quick and just keep punching the brain. while it bypasses, yes, some of it's going to punch the brain, put it to sleep. And then more of it's going to go back out to the system, diffuse throughout the system, and I'm going to start filling up other compartments. How can I fast, quick, punch the brain? And the good thing is 80% of my cardiac output is going right to the brain right off the bat. So hit them with the baseball bat right off the bat. That's why. It's not intuitive, but if it's, and part of it, and I had the same problem as I was a student. I was like, why are they calling it uptake and distribution? We don't want to uptake the anesthetic. We don't. We don't want the body to uptake. In fact, we want an anesthetic that does not want to be in the body. We want an anesthetic that has no desire to be in the body whatsoever. And you're like, well, that's counterintuitive. No, if I give you a gas that wants to be in the body, how am I going to wake you up? Got to think the big game. What am I going to do at the end? I want one that doesn't want to be in the body, and I will force it there by controlling the factors of diffusion. And the factors of the diffusion, and the most important factor is concentration. You know what? I can get gas into a body if it doesn't want to be there. I just have to push it in there. And I can push it in there with a lot of force and a lot of pressure. And that's why they will often say, overpressurize the patient on induction. They're talking over partial pressurize them on induction, meaning have a high concentration and we will force it in there. So, Coca-Cola. Carbon dioxide does not want to be in Coca-Cola. It doesn't. How do they get it in there? They overpressurize it. They put a lot of pressure on it and they bubble it through. And as it gets bubbled through, it's saying, oh, they're not going to let us, there's so much pressure, we can't get back out. And it's going to diffuse and dissolve in. That's why when you pop your Coke, it says, fine, I don't want to be in Coca-Cola. I want to be in the gaseous phase and I want out and it dissolves away. And that's why Coca-Cola goes flat. Since we're talking about Coca-Cola and we're talking about temperature, let's go there too. Which goes flat faster? Warm Coke or cold Coke? Warm Coke. Why? Why? Yeah, I might explain Henry's law. It's like saying quantum physics. I don't know anything about it. What's the answer? Quantum physics. Because if you have a lower temperature, solubility increases. Higher temperature, solubility decreases. And again, it has to do with a gas. What is a gas? What is a liquid? What is a solid? From a molecular, yeah. What is molecular point? What's happening at a molecular level? What's the difference between a molecule or an atom of a solid, a liquid, gas, gas, that's right, kinetic energy. Right, so if you have less kinetic, you have a gas wants to be a gas wants to be free. But then you go and say, well, I'm going to cram you into a fluid, a liquid. Gas and liquids are fluids. You're going to put a gas into a liquid. Well, you have to chill it out. It takes away some of its energy, take away some of its kinetic energy, so it'll slow down and it'll stay in the cooler environment. But as soon as you it has an inherent property of wanting to be a gas. But as soon as you increase the temperature, you're increasing its kinetic energy. It's going to break away a lot faster. Gas in a liquid dissolves even at cold temperatures. The only time it won't is if you get to 0 Kelvin, absolute zero. Yeah, and hopefully our patients are never going to get there. So how does Coca-Cola, Welliver, apply to patients? Well, anybody can put the patients to sleep, and we're learning how to control that and make that happen really fast. And now we know really good ways of getting them, but can we wake them up really fast? We're overpressurizing. We're learning all these ways to cram gas into a patient. How do we cram gas out of a patient? Well, we can raise your temperature, give them a fever. Well, yeah, or we could prevent them from getting cold. Prevent them from getting cold. Cold patients don't wake up. Keep them normothermic. Question?
Yes. For the third point on the slide, I think I might be wrapping two different concepts together, but, so I thought if you had, so we're saying you would have less blood flow to the lungs, allowing more of the anesthetic to get in the gas. Isn't that?
More of the anesthetic to get into
I'm sorry, into
the
the
blood
vessel.
unit. Yes.
And wouldn't that be a slower induction and therefore, like
Yes.
when more is coming in, maybe I'm thinking about like blood gas solubility.
You are thinking intuitively. Throw that out. Take intuition, throw it out. Get rid of it. Here is my alveoli. Right here is my alveoli. Okay? So, I am a choo-choo train. I need a bunch of paper or something. I can't use these are actually good ones.
You said a bunch, I got a bunch.
All right. You know where I'm going now, don't you? Here's my alveoli. And here are all my gas molecules over my volatile anesthetic. I'm filling my vaporizer. I'm filling my vaporizer over here. That's my alveoli. And this is my surface heading over. Okay, now I'm cardiac output, and here is my alveoli. And we're just going to go and say at any given moment, we're just going to keep this alveoli filled with X concentration. No matter what, this alveoli is going to have X concentration, because this is the filling station. All right, I'm allowed to use these two fingers to pick up gas, and then I'm the unit of blood. Okay. You're the brain. There you go. He's not even stuporous yet.
Make sure you
Okay.
recycle that.
Okay. Slow cardiac output. Mechanical ventilation. Ooh, hold back, preload. Hold back, preload. Hold back, preload.
Well, when you're taking it away, aren't you decreasing, until you get to equilibrium, are you decreasing the concentration in the alveoli?
I turned the ventilator on.
So you're just replacing it.
I'm just replacing it. Now, and you're like, wow, you're moving really slow. Yeah, but my cardiac output slowed from the real fast one until it got to the brain. Was probably maybe in the 30 seconds, 45 seconds difference. And then, 30 seconds later, boom! He's out! That's, in a nutshell, how it is. Now, during all this, yeah, this is leaking. And another breath is bringing it in. Out. Another breath is bringing it in. And that's how slow cardiac output speeds induction.
I have a question about the train car. How does the train car analogy affect pulmonary shunt, like a ventricular septal defect, or
Okay.
because a portion is going to the lungs, but it's reduced?
We want to go and get blood come from the right side of the heart through the lungs to the left side. And we want all the blood in the body to come through the lungs, because that's where we're filling, and go to the left side of the body. So you're saying, what if I have blood that bypasses the lungs? Now I have dilution over here. So here I am. I'm nice and slow. Now I have 8 of these. And then you join me because you bypass the lungs. Well, now I've got to give you 4 of these. And together, we now, instead of having 8 I'm going to throw at you, I'm going to throw 4 at you. That's the dilution of shunt. Now, if I have a right to left shunt, am I taking clean blood or anesthetized blood?
Right to left,
Right.
it's going to be diluted when it comes out of the
That's right.
pulmonary vein.
So is that going to slow induction?
It's going to
Slow.
effectively, it's going to
Effectively,
dilute.
yeah.
It's going to be like a weighted average.
It's going to dilute it some, yes. Now, if I happen to have a left to right shunt, I'm taking anesthetized gas back over here and bringing it through. That's not going to affect it. And you're like, well, that'll make you go back faster. No, because if it's already completely saturated, it's not going to fill up more. It's dependent upon what the concentration is, and that dictates. If it's already fully saturated, that little bit that came over here, if it gets diluted, then it will fill back up only to the dictates of Fick's law, which is basically what we're doing. Fixed is fixed by concentration. Okay, good question. Sir?
Now, we're controlling minute ventilation and we're controlling concentration, but we're not controlling cardiac output, are we? How can we alter cardiac output to?
Well, we can give a theta block. No. We're not. We're not. We are accounting for it in our mind's eye. You've got a septic patient and they are hyperdynamic. Do understand that it's going to be. Now, we are talking about gas inductions, aren't we? And onset. So now, would I do a mask induction on this patient? No. Patient came in septic, hyperdynamic. I give them an intravenous agent. And taking a look at them, I may make it etomidate. But if they're septic and hyperdynamic, they may have adrenal suppression already. I may be concerned about etomidate. I use propofol very judiciously and watch that pressure. Or, I like going off on sidelines and giving you little tidbits. I would give a little bit of etomidate and a little bit of propofol and synergy. Synergy. Prestidigitation. It's a word I learned 2 weeks ago. Prestidigitation.
That's in the Sword in the Stone. That's Disney 101.
That's why my daughter knew the answer and I didn't. The student put that in their letter of application. You tell me here that you were amazed by the cRNA that you observed while you were shuttering and the prestidigitation of what they did in the OR. What does prestidigitation mean? It's still illusion. It's magic. So what were we talking about?
Hyperdynamic.
Oh, here's another tidbit. We're going to go off of pharmacology. Walk with me. Okay. All right, make sure the camera's following. This is an easy rule of thumb. So, if you give one of Versed, you're going to get X sedation. If you're going to give 2 of Versed, you're going to get 2X sedation. You give fentanyl 1, you're going to get 1X fentanyl sedation and suppression and analgesia. You give 2, you're going to get 2. What happens if you give 1 of Versed and 1 of fentanyl?
Synergistic. 25%.
Synergistic. So do you get 2X?
25% increase.
25%. You're good. You're good. I don't have numbers like that, but that's really good. Yeah, because I was going to say 4. To make a point, I exaggerate. You're right. So if you give 1 a Versed and another a Versed, you're going to get 2 effect. You give 1 a fentanyl, you get 1 effect. Give 2, you get 2 effect. If you give 1 a fentanyl, 1 a Versed, you're going to get 2 plus effect. You'll get 3 effect. So then you go and say, how do you know if you're going to have a synergistic effect or not? It's real simple. If they have a similar effect, say sedation. We get sedation from Versed. We get a degree of sedation from fentanyl, although that's not its primary effect. It both gives you an effect of sedation. If the effect, if the effect is the same, but they work on different receptors, you're going to get synergy. That's the key. Different receptors. If I give a GABA modulator like Versed and I mix it with another one, say, orazepam, I'm not going to get a synergistic effect. But if my clinical effect of 2 drugs come from different receptors, separate mechanisms of action, I'm going to see synergy. Characteristics of the breathing circuit. waste a lot of time on this. If there are rubber aspects or if the circuit itself absorbs, then it can affect. We don't see this. It's clinically insignificant anymore in this world. So let's look at factors affecting uptake. The anesthetic blood solubility. How much does that anesthetic gas want to be in the blood? We desire an anesthetic that does not want to be in the blood. Low blood gas solubility is desirable. We can get that Coca-Cola to absorb carbon dioxide, just like we can get that blood to absorb an anesthetic gas. But we don't want it there. And if that's the case, where's the first place it's going to dump it unleavened? The brain. That's right. So here's a question. Do we want an anesthetic that has a high brain or fat or lipid solubility?
Yes.
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 No.
Yes. No. No.
Oh, it's going to stay on there.
We want it. Yes, we do want it to be in the brain. But we don't want it to be in the brain.
That's not, that's not.
High lipid solubility won't want to go to the brain and then immediately we can go to fat.
What's wonderful about our physiology in the lungs is a direct access right to the brain. 80% of it right to the brain. Boom. We have direct access right to the brain. No matter what we give, it's going to the brain. Now, we always have to think, wake up. We always have to think, wake up. So now, considering the whole big picture, we want to put them to sleep, keep them asleep, and wake them up. Do we want an anesthetic that wants to be in the brain, stays in the brain, doesn't want to come out of the brain?
No.
No. Do we have the ability to make it get in the brain? You betcha. I can put a brick in someone's brain. You give me enough pressure and a brick in a brain, and I can put them together. Such is the case with our volatile anesthetics. We can put them in there together with pressure. And now, when we reverse the concentration, because herein lies the big problem. We're talking about isoflurane. How many times, Mac, can I deliver concentration gradient, pushing it into the body? How many times? 5 times. If it's 1% to make you go to sleep, and I can go to 5%, I can get 5 times the concentration needed to push that in. I can get isoflurane into the body. I can get it into the lungs. I can get it into the blood. I can get it into the brain without difficulty. Now, it just happens to be that with isoflurane, it's a lousy gas. It actually likes to be in the brain. It likes to be in the fat tissues. It likes to be in the blood. Ergo, it is not a perfect anesthetic. I want an anesthetic that wants to be in the body. Not at all. I want an anesthetic that doesn't want to be in the body. I want it to do all its anesthetic properties and characteristics, but it doesn't want to be in the body, and that's the one I want. And which anesthetic gas is the one that doesn't want to be in the body?
Des.
Des. And what does Des really want to be? A gas. Have you ever poured Desperane on the table? You ever seen a Desperane bottle?
We saw Eager do it.
Eager, yeah. It boils at room temperature. And all boiling is boiling. It was hot. No, it's not hot. All boiling is the rapid amount of those molecules saying, I'm free, and jumping into the gaseous phase. That's all boiling is. Boiling can occur at almost any temperature. You could have boiling occur at something that would freeze us. Liquid nitrogen. Saying, we're free! Bouncing all out. So, yeah, Desperane wants to be a gas. So if we keep pushing pressure of concentration, overpressurized by concentration, we can push Desperane into the body, can't we? All right, now what happens as soon as I stop a concentration gradient, I stop delivering Desperane.
It's going to come right back out.
Literally blows right out of us very quick. And it comes out of the brain very quickly. Now let me give you a little bit of a little bit about a tidbit. I know you're getting this in pharmacology and you probably already have these numbers, but maybe you didn't look at the numbers and really think about those numbers. Sevoflurane is a real fast gas. Everybody's told you that, right? Desflurane is a really fast gas. All right? Well, we're going to go and we're going to look at some of the factors that affect uptake, and including the different compartments. Sevoflurane, you have to go and they tell you blood gas. What's the blood gas solubility? We want an anesthetic gas that does not want to be in the blood. But that's only at the beginning and maybe at the end. There are other factors. How much does it want to be in the brain? How much does it want to be in fat? How much does it want to be in muscle? Sevoflurane wants to be in all tissues of the body more than any other gas we use. Whoa, that doesn't make it sound like it's so fast anymore, does it? Sevoflurane has a low blood solubility. Sevoflurane does not want to be in the blood. That's good. When I stop putting it into the blood, it'll start diffusing into the blood, but only depending upon how much it wants to come out of the fat tissue, the brain, and the muscle. And unfortunately for sevoflurane, it has the highest tissue solubilities of desflurane and isoflurane. Ooh, nobody emphasizes that. And certainly not the drug reps that come in and give you a pretty little pencil to take you out to dinner and tell you how fast sevoflurane is. The side, it wants to be in the brain. It's slower to come out of the brain. I can wake up a patient very fast. You know what wake up means? The technical definition of wake up from anesthesia responds to verbal commands. You know what the definition of MAC awake is? Half a MAC. Half, if I give you half a MAC, you will respond to me. And you're at 0.5 or 0.5 isoflurane. That's technically awake. Yeah. Sevoflurane, I can get you down to 1% and have you respond to name, but you still have a lot of that sevoflurane lingering in the fatty tissues of your body, and it's going to slowly linger out. So now when I want you crisp and alert and say, hey, I'm ready to go home, no, you're still a little foggy in the head. Desflurane doesn't want to be in the brain, doesn't want to be in the fat. In fact, it wants to be in the fat half of what sevoflurane wants to be. So you have two patients that received sevoflurane and desflurane. The one that has the lowest solubility in all compartments, desflurane, is crisp and alert and say, hey, I want to get out of here. And the other one's like, I think I can go home. Yeah, there's a difference. That's the lowest solubilities. Alveolar to venous partial pressure. Again, it's concentration. We already, you haven't figured it out. We're repeating everything we originally said on that first picture slide. What we're talking now is from the alveoli. What's the concentration in that alveoli? To push it across into the vessels around the alveoli to take it to the left side of the heart. So the alveolar to venous partial pressure difference. And we talked about cardiac output. This is a simple formula, but I would just know it. And it's what we discussed. Anesthetic solubility. So ultimately, if we put a gas that was highly soluble in the blood, would it want to diffuse across and into the blood faster than a one that didn't want to be in the blood? So as I fill up alveoli A versus alveoli B, alveoli, I put a gas in there that wants to be in the blood, I'm going to be like, hi alveoli, good. In I go. Versus the gas that goes into an alveoli and says, I'll stay here. Now, another breath. More in, more anesthetic gas. Now we're rapidly building up a concentration. I don't have a choice, it's getting crowded in here. Into the bloodstream I go. So it is one that has a low blood solubility that will rise the FA to FI, get that concentration, so when that cardiac output, whatever it is, gets dumped, a large concentration rather than a trickle. Trickle of anesthetic gas does not put patients to sleep. A punch of anesthetic puts patients to sleep. And then once we get a good punch dose in there, we continue to fill them up with a management dose. So what we want here is the alveolar to the inspired ratio to be as close to 1. We want to get the concentration in that alveoli up to whatever we're delivering or inspiring as fast as possible. So which one do you think would get higher? The lower blood gas solubility or the higher blood gas solubility? Lower. That's right. Because what happens is, here, let's look at halothane. We're putting halothane in. Halothane loves to be in the blood. So it's immediately going to leak out of the alveoli. So I'm not going to get a high alveoli. High blood solubility gases leak out of the alveoli as soon as you put them in there. So I'm obviously not going to fill up that alveoli. Now look at desflurane, isoflurane. Sevoflurane is not in here. Sevoflurane would be right here, underneath desflurane, at about 0.7, about 0.67, 0.7 is desflurane, is sevoflurane. Desflurane is 0.42, and this is 0.46. Wait a minute. 0.46 is more than 0.42. Should these be the other way around?
That's for 0.6
Hmm?
That's for, cell is 7.69.
0.69, 0.7. Yeah. All right. But let's look at nitrous oxide. What is nitrous oxide? 0.46. What is desflurane?
0.42.
Lower. Should be higher.
But they got high concentration for nitrous oxide.
Nitrous oxide, even though it wants to be in the blood more than desflurane, we give a higher concentration. And what's the most important factor when we deliver anesthetics? Concentration. I can give 70% of this. The best I can do with this is 12, and on some vaporizers a little bit higher. So I can override solubility, especially a minor difference in solubility, by concentration. Again, another example that drives home the point that concentration is so incredibly important. And if I can go a high concentration, it will trump the other factors. And that's exactly what we see with nitrous oxide. You can make somebody go to sleep with nitrous oxide very fast. Very fast. So, the alveolar to venous partial pressure reflects the uptake of inhaled anesthetics, or you could also go and say, well, it reflects the reluctance of blood to uptake the anesthetic, and therefore, when it does get over, it's from a higher concentration gradient, and it gets to the brain at a higher concentration, you go to bed. You go to bed. Go to bed faster. Go to sleep faster. Have kids. Factors which affect the rise of alveolar concentration. Concentration effect and the second gas effect. Concentration effect, the total volume in the lungs is decreased by the amount of gas taken up by the blood. This reduction concentrates the remaining gas in the lung. So that's the second gas. Nitrous oxide. If we go, I can put in sevoflurane. I can put sevoflurane into the lungs and say I'm delivering 2%, so I get in the lungs 1%. So I got 1% in the lungs. But I was also breathing in nitrous oxide. Okay? Nitrous oxide, I can get 70% in there really fast. So if I deliver say I deliver 70% of nitrous oxide, I'm probably going to have 50% in the alveoli real quick. So I almost instantaneous. 1% SIBO, 50% nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide at that high concentration is going to move over into the blood massively, isn't it? Here's my alveoli, and I get a massive 50% of that alveoli, the volume, is nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide just moved into the blood. Well, these few sevofluranes just moved closer together, didn't they? Because the volume was decreased. Concentrated, that is the second gas effect. The concentration effect and the second gas effect. A second gas is concentrated by the movement of another gas in large quantities. Where do you see this happen? With nitrous oxide. It's associated with nitrous oxide.
Can you say that again?
What do you want me to say?
Honestly, I already forgot. It's gone. We'll go back and, that's why it's recorded.
Second
Nitrous
gas
oxide,
concentration.
nitrous oxide is where you see this. No other anesthetic gases are you going to see this occur with except with nitrous oxide. I can go and I can give you 100% nitrous oxide. What's the MAC of nitrous oxide? 100%. Yeah, essentially. So if I give you 100% of nitrous oxide, I can anesthetize you. Are there light bulbs going off anywhere here?
No, but it alone is not, that's not what I read about it. It's not long enough for.
Well, they
It's not-
used to. Do you know that they used to do dental procedures with 100% nitrous oxide? Painless. What they would do is they would give you 100% oxygen. You would saturate all of your hemoglobin. How are we doing on time? Because like I said, I'll talk forever. Okay. Money!
Our test is until next Friday, so.
Okay, all right, so,
Yeah,
what were we
go.
talking about?
Nitrous oxide.
Nitrous oxide is the only one. You give 70% of nitrous oxide. What they used to do is they used to give you 100% oxygen. Fill up all your hemoglobin, which happens very quickly, but then also saturate your plasma. Take your plasma and saturate that with dissolved oxygen. Not oxygen bound to your hemoglobin, but dissolved in the liquid itself. And then they immediately turn that off and give you 100% nitrous oxide. Alveolar rise of nitrous oxide very fast. Now your brain goes, boom, near instantaneous. Boom, you're knocked out. Out comes the tooth, rip it off, and they watch you. And about, if you're really healthy, it might be 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, maybe 7 minutes until you started becoming cyanotic. Well, we saturated the blood. All right, so 7 minutes if you're really, really healthy. By 7 minutes, you're probably cyanotic. And they'd be like, let's turn on a little bit of oxygen. Now you're getting 80% nitrous oxide and 20%. Still blue. Give them 30% and 70%. And then keep switching. And that's what they would do. Ooh, it buys you time. You've got yourself a good 10-minute, 12-minute procedure of really good nitrous oxide depth. You gave them 100% anesthetic and then weaned it down, did your real painful procedure, and voila, very effective. Concentration. Now, when you go and give nitrous oxide, say 80% nitrous oxide and 20% oxygen, well, as soon as you take a bunch of deep breaths, you're going to wash out. Now you're going to have an alveoli. That's 80% nitrous oxide. 80%, how much is in the bloodstream when you first start this gas? 0. So what happened? 80 to 0 diffusion gradient, concentration gradient. Wow, it's going to diffuse. Massive amount of that nitrous oxide is going to move out. What's going to happen to the volume? It's going to decrease. What's going to happen to the sevoflurane or the isoflurane or the desflurane that was with that nitrous oxide that's in there? 1 or 2 is going to diffuse over, but I don't have a high concentration yet. So the volume decreases. Which one has a higher concentration? This, these, or these? This. That's the concentration. Second gas gets concentrated. There's your concentration effect. So let's look at ventilation and effect on the FA and FI. If we go backwards, we talked about this. We beat this to death. What we didn't talk about is functional residual capacity. Your FRC is a reservoir. That is the part that we do not breathe down into. So if you look at the lungs, there's a big cup of flow. The bottom of that cup, we're not ventilating down into that. That's the residual capacity that gets affected by diffusion only. We don't necessarily breathe into that. That's the diffusion capacity. So we ventilate and wash out the rest, but this change is going to happen by diffusion. So if you have no FRC, you don't have a capacity of the lung that you're not going to immediately wash out. If I can wash it out with flow, I can clear it out very fast. But if I have to breathe up here and let the rest of this part of the lung happen by diffusion, diffusion is a time-sensitive event. It will be slower. So what group has little to no FRC? Cystic fibrosis. Obese. 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 And again, we talked about ventilate perfusion mismatch tend to increase the rise of FA to FA to FI also. We talked about cardiac output and shunts. Let's talk about the fourth compartment, because so many times when we talk about anesthesia, everybody always addresses one, uptake and distribution, but they stop at breathing it into the lungs and what is the blood gas solubility. How much does it want to be in the blood? Well, that's only the beginning of it. Alveoli, between the alveoli and all these muscle groups is the blood. Blood is nothing but the transport. Now, it would be a real bummer if all our fruits and vegetables never got off the truck. We wouldn't have them in the store. Same thing here. As I said, if it wants to stay in the transport, which is the blood, ain't going to do us any good. That's going to slow things down. Now, once it gets from the blood to where it's going, the first place it goes is to our brain. And our vessel-rich group is what we call it. The parts are internal organs that have a lot of vessels. So whatever has a lot of vessels is going to get the first dumping or unloading of anesthetic gas. That's our vessel-rich group. And as you'll see, the brain, being part of the vessel-rich group, closely mirrors and follows the rise of alveolar. So our machine sucks off a little sample of our expired gas, and it measures what's the concentration. What's the concentration? It does this many times, very fast, and constantly gives us concentration of the inspired and the expired anesthetic gas. And it tells us how quickly we're rising to what we are delivering. How close are they getting together? Which is wonderful. Back in the day, we didn't have that. We had to look just at how the patient's doing. But now we kind of know. We look at that number to give, am I in the ballpark? And then we still look at the patient, because that's what matters. What does the patient look like? How does the patient look? What's their physiology? What are their vital signs? And the vessel-rich group follows. Now, most of the blood goes to the vessel-rich group right off the bat. High concentration goes to the vessel-rich group. I'm going to unload, since I get to the vessel-rich group initially, you have no anesthetic. I have a big quantity of it. I'm going to start diffusing. So by the time that I go back out to the body, I come back, I don't have as much, do I? No. So what's going to fill up first? The vessel-rich group. Now, lesser percent of my cardiac output goes to my muscles. So that's going to go, and over time, is going to start taking some anesthetic gas to the muscles. And it's going to start giving it to the muscles. But the muscles get less blood, and they don't get the initial blood. So it takes longer for the muscle group to fill up. Now look at this. It takes us minutes to fill up the alveolar, the vessel-rich group, doesn't it? Very fast. Minutes. Look how long it takes to start filling up. I mean, right here, for the muscle group, it's taken me over 30 minutes to fill up the muscle group halfway. And then, how much blood flow do we have to fat? 5. Yeah, it's low. It's low. And I'm getting my rolls here. It's not getting a lot of blood flow. It's going to take me all day. 90 minutes. Well, they turned the gas off here. So let's extrapolate this out. 12-hour case. Hey, now I'm really getting my fat compartment filled up. And you will do 12-hour cases. They're coming. I don't know when or where, but they're coming. You'll do them. So, now I give an anesthetic gas that has, let me ask you a clinical question, an example question. I'm doing a 12-hour case with a moderately obese patient, and it's going to take 12 hours. Knowing that I want a fast wake-up, which of the anesthetics would be desirable? You're just going to go in default to discipline anyway, I know. And why? Because over 12 hours, the muscle group is going to fill up, but that fat group is going to fill up. And then, now, what I've done is I filled up the fat group. The muscle group was filled up hours ago. Now the muscle group is filled up, and I'm going to stop the concentration gradient from the vaporizer into the patient, and I'm going to turn off the vaporizer. And I'm going to flush them with fresh carrier gas. Now the concentration gradient has reversed. So what's going to happen? It's going to dump out of the blood. and then the vessel-rich group is going to dump into the blood. And that's going to go down and down and down until it gets to about here, where the muscle group is filled up. So now the muscle group is going to dump into the blood, the vessel-rich group is going to dump into the blood, and we haven't even started emptying out the fat compartment yet. And then that's going to start dumping. So now I got fat dumping into the blood, muscle dumping into the blood, the vessel-rich group dumping into the blood, and I'm trying to flush out the alveoli so I can continue to get it to dump into the alveoli, wash it away, dump into the alveoli, wash it away, and reverse that concentration. We made the patients go to sleep really fast by increasing the concentration on this side. How do I get a negative concentration on this side? That's what I have to do, right? I can only go to 0 on that, and my concentration here is whatever got saturated in those tissues. That dictates it. I can't take this lower than 0. I can only ventilate the lungs so much that I can get them to stay at 0 and let it drip in from the tissues. And this is why longer cases mean longer wake-up. This is why longer cases, desflurane is beneficial. Now, look at your blood solubilities. Look at your fat solubilities for sevoflurane. Now look at your fat solubilities for desflurane. One is about 40, 44. The other is about 20, 21. And you see how desflurane will be for longer cases. Will not let that reservoir of fat compartment fill up. In fact, it will only fill up half as much as the other anesthetics. Now, so yes, desflurane is very good for longer cases, many, many multi-hour. Now here's one that will get you into discussions. All right? Is all fat in our bodies the same? No. There's two types of fat, isn't there? There's adipose fat and there's visceral fat. All around my hilum, all around my lungs, my heart, my intestines, my omentum is visceral fat. And visceral fat has a lot of blood flow. Because my viscera have a lot of blood flow, so does the fat around those viscera. Oh, geez Louise. We need to split this into compartment 1A and compartment 1B. There's actually 5 compartments. And nobody talks about the 5th compartment, the vessel-rich group fat compartment. And what if I do a short duration case with a very high fat solubility anesthetic that's low in the blood? That fat solubility of the viscera isn't going to take me 12 hours to fill up. It's going to fill up in 1 to 2 hours. And in fact, the studies have shown after 2 hours, sevoflurane wake-up is delayed. In my book, if I want a crisp, neurologically intact patient to be assessed after a surgery of 2 hours or more, I'm using desflurane because that's where the studies have shown this vessel-rich group fat compartment fills up to a point that it affects neurological and wake-up. That's mine. So, time constants. So you go and say, that's fine. Now we know in general that if we have a higher concentration, we can fill up a reservoir, the lungs, faster. If I have a faster concentration, I can fill up the lungs, high concentration, high flow, even faster. And that's good, that makes common sense. But we're anesthesia, we're experts at this. So there's got to be a formula and a math problem that we can do, right? You betcha. So we can calculate this, and it's called time constants. And it works with any reservoir. It works on dams. Dams in Puerto Rico that are going to burst. If they had calculated, and I'm sure the smart people down there did, and they did their calculations, and they're like, we're going to get this much rain, this much land mass, this much square area flows into our reservoir, we're leaking out of the reservoir X amount, we're going to have an inflow of this. They knew when that dam was going to burst. just like they did out in California with the same one that blew out the scully that it was draining. They can calculate this. Same way that we're going to do it right now. When you do a wash-in, it's a logarithmic curve. It's not a linear curve. It changes over time. And the curves all look the same. When you have a reservoir, and you have a flow in and a flow out, if you flow a different substance into that reservoir, how long until that reservoir becomes the same concentration of what you're flowing in? That's the question. And I always use the analogy, because I live up in Yulee. I don't have city water. I have this in my backyard. I have this 120-gallon tank, which is very analogous to, nope, I don't want the heart, which is very analogous to the FRC of 2,500 milliliters in an average adult person. So, I'm going to go and put a flow in. There's going to be a flow out. And what I have to do every once in a while is I have to sterilize my backyard because it's out in the backyard. The pump fills it up, and we drink and use the water off of this tank that's sitting in the backyard. Well, it's sitting out there in the weather. So every once in a while, you know, it gets a little bit of algae in it. I got to sterilize it. So I'm supposed to put a cup of bleach in it. So what do? I put a gallon of bleach in there. And it kills everything. I sterilize everything. Now I have a gallon of bleach in my reservoir tank, which is going to the house, and I don't want to drink that. So what I have to do is I have to turn on my water flow here, pure water, while this thing drains out. So I measured this too, because I have also a UV light. I have 12 gallons per minute in my house. That's a good water flow, and it works really good with this too. So I have 12 gallons per minute. Okay, now what we know is how much goes in, how much comes out, and the dilution. Well, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but what we do know is that with every time constant, every unit of time, there's a 63% change. There's a 63% change with every time unit in any washout curve. Any flow into a reservoir will have, in that, whatever the time constant is we're using per minutes, there is a 63% change. So, how long do I have to run the flow in there till I not kill my family? Well,
40 minutes?
that sounds about right. Because what happens if you get a 63% change, you'll see here, time constant 63%. You take your capacity divided by flow. This isn't lined up too well, is it? So we have capacity divided by flow. And this works with all. So we have our capacity divided by flow. So what's our capacity?
120.
120 gallons. What's our flow?
12.
12 gallons per minute. What's the math? 10 minutes. 10 minutes it will take. Once I flow this for 10 minutes, I will have decreased my bleach concentration in here by what percent?
63.
63%. That's not good enough. I want 100%, but I'll take 98. You guys want 100 on your exam, but you'll take 98. And I will tell you, 90%, that's good. No, that's a B, that stinks, it's not good enough, and 90% isn't good for a pulse ox, not good enough for me. So, 63%. We know we want 4 time constants. Gets us to a 98% change. So what happens is, one way of looking at it, Jasmine, I'm sorry.
He just pulls it out.
Okay. So, after 10 minutes, I have a 63% change. I could look at that as 63% of this has been changed, then 37% hasn't been changed, right? So if I were to look at the next minute, this 37%, I'll change 63% of that. What's 63% of 37? Huh? 23? So I will change the next 23%. And there's my second time constant. Oh, now he's doing it to me. There's our second time constant. Wow. And what is 63% of 86? Well, what's 86? What's the difference? 100 minus 86?
14.
14. What's 37% of 14? Let's look at the next time constant. 95. 9. Now we're at 95. So we want 4 time constants. Let's do the calculation for the lung. What's minute ventilation? 5 in milliliters. 5,000. Capacity? Not the total lung volume, the functional residual capacity. 2,500 divided by 5,000. What's the time constant of the lungs? 2,500, 5,000 liters per minute. Boom, boom, boom. Yes. 30 seconds. 0.5 minute. Time constant for the human lung is 30 seconds. Except there's one problem with the human lung. It leaks. Oh yeah. See, now if we come back over here, this canister in my backyard doesn't have what the lung has. You know what the lung has? Essentially, it has holes in it because it allows diffusion. Oh, wow. So that actually slows down the rise or the change, doesn't it? So what we do is, if we need 4 time constants, and 4 time constants for the human lung is how many minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. We double it as a mirror of safety. You say, well, double what? Right now, all of you are sitting there breathing in 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen. How much diffusion and how much, boy, that's a high concentration of nitrogen, isn't it? How much nitrogen is diffusing into our blood? Things we never think of. 0. Net diffusion of 0. We are saturated with nitrogen in all of our compartments. Throughout our body, we are saturated with nitrogen. And now, 79% of our alveoli are nitrogen. Since there's a balance between the nitrogen here and on the other side, and in our other tissues, there's no net diffusion, which is good. It's an inert, stabilizing gas to our alveoli. Why? Because we're breathing 21% oxygen. If I stop ventilating you and you fall on the floor, you have 21% oxygen. You're going to use up the oxygen in your blood and your tissues, and you're going to have a concentration gradient, aren't you? Yes, that oxygen is going to diffuse into the blood. What's going to happen to the concentration and the volume of oxygen in your alveoli? It's going to shrink. Will it shrink a full 21%? No, because no diffusion goes to 0. It doesn't. But let's say it goes down to 19%. Well, 19% of your alveoli is going to shrink in volume, isn't it? Yeah. Well, that's not bad. Your alveoli is still going to be open. Let's say that the problem is we have 100% oxygen. And now I stop ventilating that alveoli. Well, that alveoli can shrink down to, let's say, 5 or 6% of its previous volume. What does that alveoli do? Collapses. Yeah. Well, that's another lecture, because we do that on all of our patients, called atelectasis. Be aware, and be aware that, and you all know, PEEP and recruitment maneuvers, valsalbutamol, are good things. Unless you have ARDS. They're good things. Now, on the flip side, though, you all are in front of me here. You have 21% oxygen. I'm going to go and push propofol on you, give you some lidocaine, and then I'm going to follow you with rocuronium. I'm going to take away your ability to breathe. I'm also going to put your blood pressure in the gutter. I better be able to breathe for you. So, to be on the safe side, right now, you have a reservoir. 3/4, almost 80% of your lung volume is filled with nitrogen. That's not doing me any good. If I filled up your lungs with 100% oxygen, and then I couldn't ventilate you, and then I couldn't intubate you, I bought myself some time, didn't I? Because diffusion is going to continue. So I can actually take you from about 20% oxygen up to 100% oxygen for continued diffusion, and it buys me safety. In somebody that's very young and very healthy, I could get up to 10 minutes before brain starts going Rice Krispies. Now, most of the people in this world are not going to even tolerate that, but we'll take patients now, and as soon as we push propofol on them, immediately, boom, 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 the saturations drop because they have no FRC. Now, you'll find also with obese patients, even breathing oxygen doesn't extend them as long as we'd like. But that's what we do. So, how long does it take me to take the human lung to wash out 79% nitrogen and replace it with oxygen? And that's why we did that. If the oxygen didn't leak into the bloodstream, it would take us 2 minutes. But since we know as we continue to put in a concentration of oxygen, it continues to diffuse out, we're going to double it to 2 minutes. Do that next time. Now there's two things. There is hyperoxygenation and denitrogenation. They are not the same thing. If I give you more than 21% oxygen, I am giving you hyperoxygenation. I'm giving you more than 21% oxygen. But if I just put a face mask and I blow it over your face, let's say your total inspired FiO2 is 0.8. You're getting 80% FiO2. Well, that's not going to go and get rid of all the nitrogen, is it? Because you're still breathing in a mixture of air which has nitrogen in it. Take that face mask, put it on the face, and strap it on them. That's why there's those 4 little prongs. You can put a strap on it. Or if you don't have a strap, because nobody uses them anymore, take a tourniquet. Lift your head, put the tourniquet underneath their head, and then put one on the upper little prong. It'll stick, it'll just grab it. And the other one on the lower prong. And now that face mask gets stuck on their face. Make sure your APL valve is open. Give them a high flow of oxygen. Take a nice deep breath. Because we can increase the flow. And we can actually wash out even faster. Take some nice big deep breaths. And just for gins and griggles, to see if that really works, I want you to look at your inspired and your expired oxygen. Because it not only does our gases, our inhalation volatile anesthetics, it also does our carrier gases. And you'll be like, that Dr. Welliver, he's awesome. 4 minutes! 95%! And it actually be a little slower than that. It would probably be about 85 to 88% at about 4 minutes, just slower. And again, it's because of the leaking. And that's how we calculate time constant. You guys have been look brilliant and clinical. We talked about the maintenance. Once we get to the level that we want, we have to continue to put some into the circuit to maintain that. Understand that you're going to continue to put gas into the body as you're slowly putting a little bit more into the other compartments besides the brain. You're going to get the brain filled pretty darn quick. And it's going to equilibrate pretty darn quick. But the muscle compartment and the fat compartment are still going to slowly take a little bit out of the blood, and consequently you're going to have to replace that into the lungs to fill it. And you'll get on a maintenance phase. And your inspired, your expired will slowly almost match. So then we come, and as I said, we turn it off. Vessel-rich group is going to quickly dump into the blood until you get to wherever the muscle group was. And lagging behind that will be the fat group. So now your total body spit out is going to run something like this. And then here it's going to go like this. But now we're getting down really low where the patient's going to start getting light and wake up. We don't wait till the end of the case to turn off our anesthetics. We pay close attention, we look over the drapes a lot. How you doing? How's things going? And we start to titrate our anesthetics down. And it's a balance game. Pay close attention. You'll see that we'll be very, very attuned to a jump of 3, 4, 5 beats a minute in a heart rate, especially when you're titrating something down. Or you're during your anesthetic and you got nice what we call railroad tracks, vital signs are perfect. And all of a sudden, heart rate kicks up a little bit, cycle another pressure. Blood pressure kicked up just a little bit. How long has it been since my last narcotic? Are they doing something that's a little bit more sensitive? Are they in an area where they're pressing on nerves that's stimulating the patient a little bit more? We assess these subtleties. And we'll do the same thing at the end, especially when we start decreasing our anesthetic. We don't want patients to get hypertensive at the end. We certainly don't want them to move at the end. And we certainly don't want them to wake up. As a sideline to doing all this, there is this anti-BIS, anti-brain activity monitor bias out there in anesthesia that I don't get. Some people are against it. I don't use it. It's not accurate. I don't need it. What is our end target organ?
Brain.
The brain. And what is the brain? What is the monitor that we don't use on every stinking case of anesthesia? The brain activity monitor. Does it not make sense to use a BIS monitor so that we can at least have a glorified basic EEG measurement of brain activity? I think BIS monitors should be used. It's one more tool. It's like saying, I'm not going to use it because it's not reliable. It's not 100% correct. No, it's not. It's a tool. My NIBP cup isn't 100% correct all the time. Let me give you another one. Does anybody ever think of doing a case without a pulse ox? No. Do you know, there are bigger limitations with your pulse ox than there is with a BIS monitor. So you get a little bit of variation with a BIS monitor. Think about the variation that you get with a pulse ox. Right now, I've got normal, healthy lungs. I'm breathing room air. What should my pulse ox be? I'm a real healthy guy, 99 or 100. So let's give me 100. I got 100% pulse ox. Now I'm an unhealthy guy. And you're giving me 100% oxygen. And I have a PaO2 of 100. What should my pulse ox be? Let's say my PaO2 is 105. What's my pulse ox say? 100. I got an A and a perfect pulse ox on both scenarios. Well, on the first scenario, I have a perfect VQ of 0.8. Healthy lungs, functioning. My arterial blood gas, my PaO2, tells me exactly that I have 105 millimeter mercury of oxygen on 21% oxygen. This other scenario, patient's getting 100% oxygen. Their PaO2 is 105, and they have 100% pulse oximetry. It's good, right? Now, their PaO2 should be about 600. We have almost a 500 millimeter mercury of oxygen VQ mismatch. This patient's going to die. They got some major issues going on. But everybody wouldn't think, well, pulse ox, got to work with a pulse ox. It just missed a 500 millimeter of mercury VQ mismatch. But then they won't use a BIS because it might give me numbers that aren't specifically accurate. Give me a break. Use the BIS monitors. Okay, back to wake up, and then we go to lunch. The goal is to lower the brain anesthetic level. Elimination is achieved by exhalation primarily. There's a little bit of biotransformation, not much at all. In fact, this number is even less because we don't use any of those highly metabolized anymore. And there's some transcutaneous. We actually just transpire some of this gas out. But for the most part, essentially, our anesthetics are not metabolized. They're really not metabolized much at all. Maybe 2 to 5% with sevoflurane, the others even less. So, how are we going to get these gases out? We're going to hope they don't want to be in the body, and we're going to be able to ventilate them out. So, high carrier gas flows. Low anesthetic circuit, we can't change that. Low absorption by anesthetic circuit, we can't change that. Low solubility, well, you can't change that at the end of the case. You better have chose wisely at the beginning of the case and increase ventilation. High carrier gas flow, high ventilation. But don't ventilate them to the point that you have a PCO2 of 25 or less, or even 27 or less. You just, no. So wean towards the end of the case. Maybe start thinking of titrating some opioids or non-opioid analgesics. Hopefully you started that as part of your anesthetic, and then you give more if you need towards the end. And then there is the old white stuff, save your butt. So now you're titrating back your anesthetic. Heart rate shoots up. Oh, geez, I just went up 12 points on my heart rate. I'm not even going to check my NIBP because I started sawing a grimace or a shoulder move. 50 of propofol, even 100 of propofol. Deepen your anesthetic. Why not? It's cheap, $10. Who cares? All right? It's about maintaining your anesthetic. We're not purists here. You read, you identified, you need to deepen your anesthetic? Sure. I could go and turn my anesthetic back up, but that's counterintuitive. If you're Dr. McDonough here, he'd say, well, I'd be running nitrous oxide, and nitrous oxide diffuses very well. It's a natural gas to begin with, so if it wants to be a gas, it's going to come right on out of the body. So I'd be running a 70% nitrous oxide anesthetic. That's Dr. McDonough. He's got a point. He's got a point. I personally don't like nitrous oxide, but it's great. Start running nitrous oxide at the end of the case. 70% nitrous oxide. Are you not running a 3/4 MAC anesthetic? That will make you look pretty good. So now you can increase your anesthetic. Throw nitrous oxide on at the end and bring the other one down. Now you start, nitrous oxide will go away in a lickety-split. Boom, it's gone no matter what. No matter how long you ran it, it's going to go away in lickety-split. That's another reason why I let you. Oh, look at all my patients wake up. Yeah, that's your recovery rate. So, run nitrous at the end. Wean your anesthetics. Because you want to get these higher solubility anesthetics out of the body. And nitrous oxide is another way. Propofol is another way. Another way I heard in an institution, and it floored me, is just leave them, get them back breathing, and send them to the recovery room with an endotracheal tube. That's not good form. So, choose your anesthetics wisely, understand what factors, now you can affect it, but on the wake up, it's very much contingent. The only thing that we really have to do, that we have the ability to wake patients up, wean it early, higher flows, higher ventilation. Or wean it earlier, deepen, use nitrous. I highly use nitrous. Before that terrible drug goes away and is banned from the market, use nitrous. Get some experience with it. So, any questions? Let's have lunch. We're talking, what, an hour?
Or less.
Whatever you want.
You guys want to just keep going? No, go eat.
No, I need to
We don't
I'd say,
we don't need an hour.
All right, you want half an hour for lunch?
Yeah,
Whatever you want.
Come back at lunch.
I'm done.
Come back at 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm done with a half hour.
One's good with that?
As long as you don't mind us like eating while you're.
No, you can eat here, absolutely, absolutely. I'm an informal guy, and the next lecture's not long at all.